All right, all right, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Prop Tech Genius Show. And today's genius is Lee Odess. Hey, Lee, how are you?
Hi. Thank you. Genius. I didn't know that you can call
Yeah,
that,
you
but
didn't
thank
know
you.
that part? Yeah, so we compliment everybody who comes on the show. We call you a genius. It's
That's
like,
very kind of you.
yeah, not everybody accepts it as well as you do because people are like, what? Oh, wait, like, what? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh.
Oh, I didn't say I accepted. I just it was my natural response was to say thank you. But yeah, well, you can let me know after this if it holds. But yeah,
If it holds true. No, everybody's a genius, I'm telling you. And you're a genius at something, I'm sure. And
something.
we all have our talents.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, great. Well, welcome to the show. It's going to be fun conversation. We're going to talk through all like your journey and kind of where you've been and what you're doing now. And so, but yeah, so let's get into it. So why don't you introduce yourself to my audience and kind of tell people what you've been working on lately?
No, I appreciate it. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. So my name's Lee Odess, as you said, in Bethesda, Maryland area, and I focus on the access control and smart lock industry. So if anyone's used, typically it's a key card to get into a
Mhm.
building or a lock to get into your house, that industry. So I focus on it globally. And we do things like content creation, community building. We create tools and insights. There's really not anybody else that focuses just on the access control and security industry globally and travels around and meets with a bunch of companies and talks about the today and tomorrow side of what's happening in our industry.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about, yeah, no, it's super cool because it touches everybody from schools, right,
Yeah.
to offices and the threats that you have to deal with from, so I mean, you're keeping people safe, right? So it's
Yeah.
a kind of an interesting.
And that's the sort of what the changes that are happening is, yeah. So a couple things on that. We are a utility as a bill as a product going into every structure at this point. And depending on where you're at in the world, there's different areas of focus. But yeah, our core value proposition is to keep bad people out and keep people safe.
Hmm.
And now we're going through the digital transformation, which is we want to do that, but then also let the right people in and create value beyond just locking and unlocking and keeping bad people out.
Right. Yeah. No, no, no. That's very true. I mean, so is it all through locking mechanisms in some sort of device? Have you seen like the facial recognition things that are out there?
Yeah.
How good are they? I'm just
Yeah. So there's different components to it. Everything from the key that's been
yeah,
around forever, right?
right.
All the way up to facial recognition and things now around systems utilizing machine learning and computer
Yeah.
vision and the rest of it. And then somewhere between there is
Hmm.
facial authentication, which is in facial recognition,
Right.
fingerprint. You've seen people use vein. So yeah, there's all sorts of different, what I'll call methods to drive high levels of assurance, but then high levels of convenience as well.
Hmm.
And it's just like anything else. If you track some of the movies in the past and bring it
Yeah, I
forward,
know.
like you see everything from Total Recall to the Jetsons, and somewhere in between is
Yeah.
yes, all of those different things. And yeah, they do it well. There's different applications, and what we're starting to see now is they're being brought into certain verticals where those things make a more sense than other areas. But
Hmm.
there's also the same considerations of a lot of things like ethics and privacy and whatnot that go into the application of using this technology so it's done properly and for all the right reasons.
Yeah, for sure. I mean yeah. I mean, I know that I think I don't know. I mean, there was a big concern around privacy and how you can use that data or what and you're trying to balance the needs of security and the needs of privacy, and that's always been a conversation. That's been a conversation for a long time since the
Yeah.
internet, right? I
Yeah, I
mean,
think it'll be around forever.
yeah.
It's the same conversation of like historically you couldn't have convenience and security in the same world either. So if you think about access control has always been about I'm going to inconvenience somebody as much as possible to keep them out of where it's so locks,
Mhm.
bollards, even back
Yeah,
to caves, they put
right.
rocks in front of holes in the side. So like that's always been the practices. Well, now with technology, there's a question being asked of, can't I have both convenience and security and safety,
Mhm.
as well as, I like that. The question I like to ask is like, we believe that we can't have safety and security and cyber security and ethics and all the rest of it when there are a lot of examples where that actually can be applied
Mm.
and can be done. It's just a fact of understanding the dystopian side of biometrics, for instance.
Mhm.
It gets a lot more voice than the utopian, and I blame the biometrics industry for this as the
Interesting.
reason why. Give me a second. I'm on a podcast. It's good.
Hi.
Okay. Can we pause for 1 second? I got someone. Is
Yeah,
that all right? Give me
no
one
worries.
second. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
It's working from home.
Yeah, I feel you. I do the same.
Sorry.
It's all good. No worries. I can
Oh,
cut it. It's all good.
all good.
All right,
Hi.
awesome.
So we're back.
We're back.
Nice. Nightmare. Yeah.
All
So much
good.
for access control of my own stuff. But yeah.
I know, right? No, I feel you. That's cool. That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, so is there a utopian version of where that can exist, right? Where there is convenience and you can keep the bad people out and it works pretty seamlessly, or are we still working towards that?
No, there are definitely companies and methods of having ethical biometrics in place. So yes,
Yeah.
there are. But just like everything else, there's everything in moderation. There's bad actors that exist.
Yeah, I know.
There's great examples where it can't. It's just I think depending on where you're at in the world, there's people implementing them currently now, and then there's other parts in the world where they're thinking about it in greater detail, if you would, and there's parts of the world where they're actually utilizing the technology for what people would determine as unethical. So you have like the laws of nature apply here as well.
Right. Yeah, yeah. No, no, for sure. I think but I think as we digitize more and more of the real estate world, right? The whole, I just see there's more and more discussions as we kind of get into the whole real estate technology, and it's really kind of in its early maturity as an industry. This cybersecurity and understanding security in general around. I mean, we always had access controls, and it was always like I used to work at Fortune 500 and I had my badge. And if I wanted to get anywhere, but like if I didn't have my badge, it was no big deal because somebody would let me in or whatever it might
Yeah,
be. Or like I never had an issue getting into any building anywhere, right?
yeah,
Even if I had my badge, didn't have my badge. Was I technically supposed to do that? No. But it was interesting for sure, right? It
yes.
was
Social engineering is been around as long as everything, and
right,
electronic access control has been around for 30 years. So it started
right,
around 1973 is actually when the first one happened. So we've had this for 30 years. I think the change of what's happened is the expectations of the system are changing and the architectures of how they're being used. So the architectures, like for instance, systems that utilize cloud, mobile wallets. There's a lot of things that are changing, and because of that, the expectations of how these systems function, and not only from the people making them, but then the people that are buying them and using them. Um, we've been an industry that, frankly, I joked with you when we started this was we've done a good job because it was a high risk type thing. Like nobody wanted to be the person that was like challenging the security experts because if
right,
something bad happened, you don't want that on you, right? But now
right.
the expectation is, whether it's the HR of the company to the person that's focused on engagement of the tenants that are working within the real estate to whatever it might be that are saying, hey, I've got this utility going in. Can you help me deliver whatever the value creation that you want, whether it's revenue generation, operational efficiencies,
Oh,
all of
wow.
that stuff. So it's no longer these siloed systems that just get installed.
Hmm.
You're expecting either our systems to be able to do that or putting systems on top of them to extract the data so that you are able to do whatever you're looking to go do. And that's really the big function and the big change. But yeah, humans will continue, especially culturally, depending on where you're at, things like tailgating, right? Where like you're
Hmm.
talking
Yeah.
about, let me in, you hold the door for them. If you don't, it's rude. Whereas other parts of the world that doesn't exist, so you don't see it as much in that area.
Uh,
But technology can help you deliver awareness more to when that is happening and help deliver, reduce the security issues you may have at your place. So yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's as more and more I think as companies become, there's highly technical companies out there today. Like even, but I think but there'll be more and more of that. There'll be more and more people wanting to protect and their company secrets and their IP
Yep.
and not every IP can you patent, and so you're going to have to be very, very careful of access control. And I think as more and more companies eventually become digital companies, this is going to be a big deal, right? So you're going to have this whole access control and who can get in your buildings. And even if you have a building, or maybe it's something, but most people will have buildings. I don't think that's going to go away. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where this goes for sure.
Yeah. I mean, as you look at the convergence of what's happening logical, right? Like a single sign-on and the ability with passwords and what's going on in that area,
Hmm.
the bridge to the physical working with the logical, a lot of the
Right.
truths that exist in the logical will exist in the physical and the physical and the logical. And I I think some of this will be like just hygiene type expectations that will change to whether it's you're doing comps on a building or hey, I've
Hmm.
worked at this place, or if it's a commercial real estate developer, a tenant comes in and delivers the expectation around how it should work, like,
Hmm.
doing a cyber audit on a building at this point to know whether it's safe will also include the physical side because you can imagine, yeah,
Right.
we've all seen again the movies and there's real life examples where someone pretends to be an HVAC contractor, gets
Right.
in, puts a drive into a computer and steals the secrets to the world and then leaves. Like they are tightly coupled to be able to do that. But even more, I think as real estate becomes more around hospitality in a lot of ways, where they're delivering like, like help me get people back to the office or help make it more dynamic. So if I'm doing co-working or hybrid working, whatever it might be, you want to create a sense of delight and excitement when they show up. If you come and you're supposed to be there and I go to the door and it doesn't work, where we've celebrated that before as like at least we kept you out. Now it that's not allowed to happen. If you're supposed to
Right.
be there, we want to deliver it the proper experience, and there's ways to do that
Yeah.
now that didn't exist, 10 years ago.
Ah, interesting. So, I've seen where, and somebody was telling me, and I don't know if this is part of your platform or not, we can get into your solution. But the managing the guests, like you
Yeah.
can manage your employees, like that's no big deal, right? You go through your employee process and you do all those things. And so then that people have been doing that for a long time. It's managing, obviously the people that are coming on site that aren't regularly there, where that's like the hugest threat to whatever it might be, like liken it back to your HVAC contractor reference, um, it is interesting. And understanding, I guess from a real estate owner perspective is how much is too much, and are we balancing, back to your comment about the whole convenience thing, is there a way to do this? Are y'all developing stuff that it's where it is convenient and it is also a safe? I mean, is that where it's moving to?
Yes. So what you're talking about there is like knowns versus unknowns. Like the
Right.
known people were the people you gave badges to. Now, some would make a hard argument that the insider threats are actually greater than the outside. Um, it's sometimes easier to point to the outside to say like, everyone in here is good, everyone out there is bad. Like that's our default,
Yeah.
but realistically, it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
that that said, the overall idea of like how do you manage visitors, whether they're again people off the street coming into the office to for meetings, or they're service
Mhm.
contractors, things like that, right? And as delivery has increased to certain sectors of the real estate world, whether it's multifamily or mixed use, and that are bringing stuff in, like all of a sudden you went overnight, even though those knowns of like, I had the same UPS, Amazon delivery person. Now all of a sudden it's contract out. You don't even know on any given
Right.
time. So how do I manage all that stuff? So it's far more dynamic. There are systems, yes. Visitor management systems have been around for a long time. They've been primarily focused on compliance and high security, to where now they're digital. I can do things. Actually, one of the things through COVID that we talk about that it's been a change is, right, like all of a sudden I can send those things to people and they can do some pre-qualification questions and give heads up that they're coming if they're like a known
Hmm.
unknown, like, I'm here for a meeting. Or when they get there, they register at the desk, and it starts a sort of waterfall of automation and communication notification that happens. So there's a way to do that. And then if you want to even couple it on top of it, there's systems out there that then can even go out and track some external data points to know, like, are they on a threat database somewhere, stuff like that, right? Where
Interesting.
it's checking that to know, like, oh, okay, well, that person, whatever, like there's issues like at schools and places like that where you'd want to know
Exactly.
that they're not allowed to be within 100 feet of schools, and all of a sudden they show up. Somebody probably should know that. um,
You think?
you would hope. And then, I mean, even further down is systems will start to automate based off of that, like do lockdown and set off alerts and whatnot. So yeah, so they're there. But your question around the balance, if you would, between security and convenience on that end, yeah, that's a dynamic question that has no answer. The answer that has been binary, where it's like, no, you can't have convenience with security. That is what's gone. Now it's I want both, and you would take a look at what's okay. The utility, in my opinion, is the safety security side, and
Hmm.
this is why you see a lot of tenant engagement applications, building management apps, and things like that that come into the space, into commercial real estate. And they have this great idea that like everyone's going to order lattes off of the apps, and we're going to do all sorts of fun gamification. And you find a lot of those companies end up being access control companies, because I don't care how good the lattes are. If I don't feel safe and I'm not safe, I'm not coming to the building.
Hmm.
So there's typically a level of access control. Plus, access control is like one of the only things everybody does that comes into the building. I don't care if you use a card, phone, fob, whatever.
Right. Right.
A guest, a known person, delivery. There's some level of access control. So from a utility standpoint, people then gravitate and they purchase it, or they build value around it. So it's also why I believe it's the space that our industry can command, if it wants
Mm.
to, right? But some of this, we're an old industry
Right.
where our identity is safety. We're not convenience people. We're safety people, right? Like, but there's a whole new breed of people coming into the space that are challenging those conventional wisdoms and truths. And we're going through a transformation, just like the real estate community, and our
Hmm.
products will serve the customer base. And if they don't, I bet you the customer will find somebody that will.
Yeah, for sure. Right. That's generally how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until something happens. And
Oh,
then the pendulum will swing the other way, right? I mean,
yeah.
it just
Well, I
is.
mean, for
Yeah.
our space, what happens, like 9/11 and Lockerbie and like high security events impacted.
Hmm.
That's why even, and it hit even the commercial real estate was,
Yeah.
based off of big events like that. All of a sudden, you used to be able to walk into every building, get in an elevator, go up to a floor, and then all of a sudden they're like, show me your business card. So that was sort of
Hmm.
coming out of a disaster, which then impacted our industry and then impacted commercial real estate, how you managed it. And then it's continued to go from there. Now, though, you have impacts like, you know, the iPhone bringing consumerization. You've got the idea from Salesforce bringing SaaS into the world, and people starting to ask questions. DARPA brought the internet, so now things online. So like those things are also inputs, where before, like, external forces didn't really matter. And then the commercial
Yeah.
real estate never asked us about it. So we're like, all right, we'll just make sure people, bad people don't get in here. And we were like, cool. And then we did a good job of that, but now it's changed.
Yeah. So where do you see it going, like in the near future? Like what are the major things that you think it ends up happening? Like, are there any substantial shifts, or is it still the same? Or it's just incremental kind of things?
Yeah. No, I think so. Just like everywhere else where there's transformations that happen,
Mm-hmm.
the analogy I like to bring is that it's like water turning to ice, where water is the old way, ice is the new, and right now we're in that
Mm-hmm.
weird period where it's like slush, and it's like depending on if you're the ice people, you're like it's all changed, and then the water people are like nothing's changing because it's all true though, because that wherever
Yeah,
you're at a given time. So
sure.
like high security will continue and the demands of that in certain sectors and places and people will continue to incrementally grow by 5 to 8%. But then also at the same side, we're seeing a higher group of growth and adoption, especially in commercial real estate, where there's pressure being put on currently right now to change and do things different.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing adoption there, and what that looks like in the end is more like an enterprise software industry where we'll have middleware companies, applications sitting on top, new companies coming in that are building a cloud and mobile first. Um, the reality, it's somewhere again in between where we're currently at now. But I do think the rate of adoption to this new will be much greater than what it has historically been, which has been incremental.
Yeah.
It's also like in our industry, globalization was kind of hard because it's so hardware driven. We've been a hardware industry, and like a lock here in North America didn't really work over in Europe. Like
Right.
it just the openings were different. Now with software, you can bring software from Europe into North America, and because of that, options are there. And
Mm.
I think our industry, like the commercial real estate industry, is tired of being told no by us, and they're finding people that are like, yeah, we can do that, and then they do it, and then you see a value arbitrage and a change happen. And I think ultimately it'll look like these buildings, like the access control industry, will be more about like a physical interface of how you interact with the space where you can come
Mm-hmm.
up. It'll know whether you should be there or not. It'll know the
Right.
level of access you get. It'll set notifications off, and then it'll mix with the high security that if there's something bad that happens there or around it, you'll be notified. And so it'll be very dynamic versus very analog as it is currently right now. And I think the
Right.
biggest change is the expectations of the systems where a legacy access control system, the day it was installed was the best day. It degraded over time to where now the best day when you install these systems, the best day is ahead because they get better, smarter. You start to add, they're a bit more dynamic, more information and more interaction, make them even better. And
Yeah.
that's why it's becoming somewhat of an exciting industry where you're seeing a ton of investment coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think people see that ability for it to be far greater than what it has been, not in lieu of, but in addition to it's a $10 billion market globally is what they say it is, which I think it's like bigger, but we all hallucinate over that number. But this can be upwards of 60 to 100 billion is the way we see it based off of
Yeah.
what's happening with software. So because of that, interesting stuff happens.
Yeah, I think, and so it does get to the point of not only are you controlling where people can go, but to also marry that with where are people?
Yep.
Like where are they hanging, right? So the occupancy sensor goes from maybe a sensor that's on the wall understanding people, but maybe it's an RFID on the badge they're walking around with, or you're tracking their devices or something like that, right? I mean, does it
Yeah.
go there?
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely people, places, and things.
Yeah.
And even from a real estate, what's neat about this is following some of the trends that you see in it where people want to utilize, take New York City, you'll have a building across the street that will have a pool on the rooftop or offices or,
Mm-hmm.
some maybe a restaurant, whatever. And this ability for me to actually connect all of those spaces around the identity of the person of where they're going, and that person has the ability to dynamically engage with those spaces and to do that.
Mm,
So the continued flowing, whether that's inside the space or outside of it, and tracking it based off of a bunch of different things. And we're also seeing like large communities being built. Like there's one in LA currently right now where they said basically anybody and everybody that comes, I want them to use this and have the same experience. So whether you're going to the stadium, you live there, you're renting, you're buying food, you're buying clothes, you're a
Wow.
visitor coming in, whatever, that
Right.
experience is entirely around that when you're there, whether, and then I know what will happen is it'll be from there to whether I go to New York, I go down to San Francisco or over to San Francisco to Florida, whatever. Like that experience is about me as a human being interacting with space and it all
Mm-hmm.
being connected. That's where it's going to. And
Yeah.
you having the choice to decide based off of what you'll information you'll give them will be the response of, level of access or, whatever it might be that you'll be able to get based off of you interacting and giving information and it taking information and giving you access.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is super cool. So how did you get into
Yeah.
access controls? Like what was the driver there?
Yeah, I've always been in building products. So
Mhm.
along my journey, I had an audio video integration company, and then when we sold that, it was like, what do I want to do next? And there happened to be a small company here in the Bethesda market that somebody introduced me to that was an access control, and
Mhm.
they happened to be the first cloud-based access control, so a bit more forward thinking and leaning, and I learned a lot, and then I've just stayed since then. And I don't know, I wouldn't say like I grew up like I love locks. Like it wasn't like that wasn't a thing. But I did like once I got into it, it's an industry that delivers value of like safety for people,
Yeah.
which is a
Mhm.
so there's a value that you can get behind on that end. And then also I just saw opportunity for disruption because it's been a legacy industry that is going to evolve. So it was a nice home to be able to do the type of work that I like to do and get to stay here in the area. So that was
Yeah.
that was helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So I so from the very beginning you got into there. So what was it like? Where'd you go to school? Like, what did you study? I always find it super interesting because, there is no real estate degree out there.
Yeah.
There is no like real estate technology degree out there. So it's always, I always try to find people's paths. So where'd you go to school?
Yeah, I went to the University of Central Florida in
Okay.
Orlando.
All
Um,
right.
I
Very
wouldn't
cool.
say I went there for a number of reasons. One was for sports, but then I just stayed down there after I stopped playing sports and was in. I don't know. I wouldn't call it the best student in the world. So I was going to go into sales.
Yeah.
That's what my dad did. So I was going to follow along with him. And
Uh-huh.
he was an electrician at one point and worked in
Yeah.
building products on the lighting side. So I think I was always going to be somewhat products going into spaces type of a thing because my grandfather did that, my father did that, and I
Yeah.
think that was
Okay.
sort of a natural place for me to go, and opportunity existed to get a job with Lutron Electronics, which is a lighting control industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always liked the manufacturing. I've liked the working within a place where it's like tangible, you could see it. So whether it's a lighting control on the wall or a lock on a door, it's like you every space you go into, I think there was a connection that I've had with that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always been sort of attracted to the technology side of those industries, not necessarily like the distribution of them, if you would.
Right.
And because of that, there's sort of a lane of people, if you would, that are always connected to building products and the technology standpoint of it. And I just kind of
Stay
followed
there.
that. Moved here to DC actually to be part of like, Lutron wanted me to work with the National Association of Home Builders. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say that got me into built environment space and then
Right.
built relationships over the years on that and just sort of stayed in that lane. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's really because you're building us this depth of expertise in a certain in an industry that's constantly evolving, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's super awesome. So what as far as you know you started like in the residential side, so that's always kind of interesting. And you went to commercial. Do you think the applications that are happening in commercial have some sort of play in residential real estate? Is there
Yeah.
something?
Yeah. I mean, I think the big secret there is that most small to medium sized business use a lot of residential products anyways, and then
It's true.
it gradually grows from there. So yeah, and then a lot of the service providers, some do specialize just in residential, but then you do light commercial, and then next thing you know, you're in commercial, or a commercial company wants to do some residential, so they bring you in house, and then either they stay with it or get out of it. Like, so the exposure is there, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not very far off. The fundamentals in a lot of ways are they work in both sides with a lot of these things. The application may start to get nuanced, but the overall generalized sort of application of, how things lock and how lights turn on are fundamentally a lot of the same, on that end. So yeah, it's I think you do at some point make a decision, just because
Mm-hmm.
again, those deeper relationships. But yeah, I float between both. We cover residential, we cover commercial. I spend more time on the commercial side just because I think the size of impact in dollar, and it's also, uh, there's more emotions in the residential side in a lot of ways than the commercial. It's more transactional on that end. So,
Yeah.
it's, I don't know, but I do talk about smart locks from the residential side, but I would say 90% of my time is discussions around commercial side of the world.
Right, yeah, for sure. I mean, so way back in the day, I was a general contractor, right? So I did a lot of commercial stuff, and I would dabble in the residential thing, and I'd be like, it's just a different animal. It's
Yeah.
like y'all can have them. Like, God bless you, all the people that deal with residential
Yeah.
real estate. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Let's just paint it white. Right.
Yeah,
Like all the
exactly.
different finishes,
Yeah,
and yeah.
I know, because I was like, "Oh, I don't know." So my uncle, like, fabulous guy here in Austin, and he's been in residential real estate his whole, and he builds these, $1 million homes, and
Yep.
that's what he does. And he's super good at being very, even keeled and very level headed, and because those people get a little cray cray. They're like,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh,
Yep.
let's just change it again for the seventh time. And like,
Yep.
I'm just like,
It's a different
yeah,
level of patience than some other areas. So yeah.
yeah, for sure. But he's really, I mean, he's definitely, it's a skill to deal with people who want to change things a lot. That was not my jam. Like, I'm
Yep.
like, look, the blueprint said this. All right, you want another change order? I'm not
Yeah.
changing it for free.
Yep.
All those great things. That's why I like commercial. It's just more, it was more, I guess, structured in a way, made it easier to deal with, right? Because you're dealing with a client that's got blueprints, they've got a scope of work, they've got this already, and they know that that's how that game goes, right? And
Yep.
they know if they change something, they should expect a change order, and they know if they do this, they should expect certain things, right? So it's very a different kind of environment for sure.
Yeah. Different tracks for different folks on what they like to do, and yeah. So it's that tracks for me as well.
Yeah. So are you finding, I know originally back in the day, I was a multifamily owner and we were trying to, like, keys were the bane of my existence. Like, I freaking hated keys. Like,
Hmm.
because everybody would lose their key and then you had to they got locked out and then you would have to do this charge where you'd have to let them in. And I was trying to find any sort of way. I was doing keypads. I was doing anything I
Yeah.
could to get away from keys, right? But I know that early days on, like this was back 2010, right? Was, it was the doors were the problem, right? You could get a lock set, you could change it out, but you had to deal with, are the locks getting better to where you can do with the existing mortise hole. Like you don't have to refab your door or whatever it might be. Or maybe there's a little more thought around that.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's always instance where this does what I'm saying doesn't apply, but in general, yes. Um, keys will keys will be around forever. To what
Oh, please don't
degree?
tell me that.
Well,
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, realistically, yes, they will be here. Now, percentages of use versus other methods, it'll be greater, less than how
Hmm.
they're utilized now. The most new construction, and again, if we're talking about multifamily Class A, there's not many Class A that are being built with keys at this point. There's a level
Hmm.
of digitization that's happening, expectation from a process, but also cool factor on that end. But
Hmm.
yeah, depending on the class of building that are being built, there would be now. I do believe there are certain verticals like multifamily where you could see at some point, the 99% of the time being digitized where you don't have to, but there probably will be a key backup override at some point too, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
um, there are still instances where you need that. There's cost impacts that frankly come into of like secondary doors and things like that of why you would want to go do and put it in there. But I do think as the value increases and just like everything else, price starts to decrease, it's almost like going to be a no-brainer IQ test of whether you would utilize digital locks versus not at that point. And then you're just going to have to deal with the inventory of existing structures that are out there,
Right.
which then leads to your question on the ability to fit out doors that have been around for a while with the opening types that you want to have. And there are ways in products to be able to do that, whether it's back of the door type products where you're not changing
Mhm.
out the front, like, or complete. The other thing is that we're seeing a lot now, and this is, I would call it more of European impact into North America, specifically is like the cylinders inside the lock, like the little keyway. Like,
Mhm.
so not having to change out the entire lock, but changing out the keyways themselves and digitizing those. So like the
Right.
mechanical
Okay.
structure doesn't change, but the electronics and the inside do. So you
Interesting.
have that happening now too. So yeah, I mean, there's really, if someone's telling you you can't, it's probably because they don't want to.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
there's a solution typically for everything. Again, there's always an example of how I'm wrong there, but majority, if we're talking majority, the answer can be yes.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, the keyway thing is really interesting, right? So just leaving the lock and just changing out the keyway. I mean, there used to be those locks that way back in the day where you could do that. They had like the quick set ones where you put the little tool in there and then you rekey a lock or
Right. It was
whatever that was.
rekeying. Right.
Yeah, that
It's
whatever that thing was. I
yeah.
mean, there's been all sorts of different ways to kind of control access and control locks and do different things. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's about, okay, I guess kind of convenience. We don't want to replace the whole lock. We just need to change a key. Or we don't want to, I mean, we want to be able to do this whole digital thing, but not have to rehab, put in a new door because we can't, you know what I mean? Because doors can be expensive. But
Yeah.
I find it interesting. So past the locks though, and then is there other access control things that people should be looking at from you know, is there
Yeah.
is it just doors? It's not just doors. It's like
No,
other
it's
things.
gates. It's yeah. So basically, if you're say in the multifamily, it's from the street all the way into the unit. Is really you should be looking at the different ways based off of the different use cases of who's interacting with the space. So again, whether it's
Right.
the resident, the maintenance side of things, the operations, it's delivery, it's gas, all of that stuff. Like you should look at it. So that's the intercoms, the gates, the parking garages, the parking gates, elevator control, unit, secondary units, your auxiliary spaces that you either are monetizing or looking to
Hmm.
or not, just want control. You're seeing some buildings actually where there's nobody working in them. So how do you operate that building when people are living there and access control needs to participate in that? To the commercial real estate side, which has been, especially if you're talking office, you have the tenant spaces and the building space and how all of those interact and work together.
Right.
And again, that's from the street, whether it's a person or car or transportation, all the way up into the units and thinking about that. So it's a holistic view of that versus just the shell. We've always been an industry that focused on the shell of the building, like the four walls,
Right.
reader on
Uh-huh.
the outside and or a call box, intercom type system, and then it was the Wild West internally, if anything. To where now all of that is involved.
Integrated.
Yeah, it is. And you're seeing it now in retail too. So if we talk about, you get into those like that nuanced, your loss prevention side. If you think about now, if you go to like, go to a CVS, Walgreens, any drugstore that goes into that experience now is, I wouldn't call it the greatest experience, but you're trying to, manage shrinkage and things like that are happening. So how our products go from where before it was just the typically wherever the money was held and the building itself. Now it's getting into the actual little cabinets of where products are and how you can interact, or
Interesting.
hospitals and things like that, where you have NICU units and, after like clean rooms and that. Plus, if you think about the
Mm-hmm.
visitors that happen and talk about high stress, like how do I create a secure space, but then also convenient and to even move into the shipping of goods that come into the space of,
Right.
yeah. So it's a very dynamic space now where historically, we this is what part of the reason of like the work that we do, trying to cover the whole market, is
Mm-hmm.
that people have somewhat of an expectation of what they could think about our industry because again, did anyone get shot today? Nope. Cool. We're doing a good job. To where now it's like, how do you help
Yeah.
with operations and be a better value creator than has historically been there, where you can still keep bad people out, but we could also add more value.
I mean, I also think even to the point of the employees, like there were back in the day, I was in HR and there were certain areas where you had to had some sort of certification to be
Correct.
back in that area. You could control that too,
Yep.
just with their learning management systems and their training and certification systems on, hey, you're not certified to be back there, so you can't be back there, right?
Right. Yep.
Which
There
is kind
is.
of interesting, right? So
Yep.
they did some of that, but it was very clunky back in the day, and it just you had to and it wouldn't update well. So be updating that in real time, or how do I certify somebody to be in a certain area and like without it'd be interesting to see where it all kind of integrates to, right?
Yep. Now the again, I think historically it was hard on purpose because part of the way that we delivered higher levels of security was to isolate. So the sort of attack surface was limited. So we wouldn't want
Hmm.
to integrate on that end. But yeah, there would be holes in that theory because, things like someone got let go, but their badge
Hmm.
wasn't turned off, and
Right.
then they, come back to the space all angry. And bad things could happen and, not done on purpose by anybody to not continue the high level of security as one. Now, the automated capabilities of having these systems work with APIs and integration so that your HR, when you turn somebody off, it not only turns off their ability to get on their computer, but it turns their badge off if they have a badge. Uh, all of that stuff, the expectations there should be that all of that stuff is automated, and it can be. What has to change is a bunch of stuff, but one of them is my hope is by like coming on things like this is that folks that are working with you and listen to the stuff that you all put out is to change the level of expectations that you have and have higher levels of curiosity and ask the question, because you don't have to have how it's been for the past 30 years. Even though that's been good, keep it. You can still have that, but it doesn't mean that you can't also have the added value put on top of those systems to be able to help you with operational efficiencies, return on investments. Like there's a
Hmm.
whole new world that comes to our industry. There's a group of us large that want that story to get out to the marketplace so that the customers start to demand versus, just saying, we're good. No one died today, so we're good.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, for sure. And I think this will also become more and more of the forefront as spaces become multidimensional, right?
Hmm.
I think, like, everything's going to trend to be more mixed use. So you're going
Yep.
to have customer facing, public facing spaces along with some private companies at the same
Yep.
time, right? And so you're going to have to manage that complexity of who we let in our space. And I mean, I think even at some multifamily buildings are considering it, like they're taking their community centers and turning them into co-working space that are public
Right.
facing.
Yep.
And so they can make the money. But that
100%.
creates a whole other sort of security issues and access control issues that you have to worry about and think through, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
100%. There's a large hoteler here in the DC area that their lobby is also a coffee shop.
yeah.
Right. So how do you deliver levels of security for the unknowns while there's people are working there that are known, and the dynamic side of that? Yeah, it's complicated. And that's why I think the only way it gets solved uh is taking what we've known of delivering that security, but layering on the technology end of what we had to be able
Hmm.
to deliver the high levels of assurance, but then also a high levels of convenience. And it'll continue to accelerate. This is why like computer vision and some of the stuff that's going
Hmm.
on within the space to be able to do that automated versus it's still being people sitting in a room with a bunch of screens looking at everything to make sure it's all good. Like that's how it's done in a lot of ways. We're currently now, though, we're gravitating more towards an automated process of how those things work to a certain degree. And not every vertical, but there will be, especially commercial real estate. We're seeing a lot happen in that space now because the expectations of how these systems work, it's going to have to, like, it's just it's
Right,
going to be met that way to be able to do so. As well as,
right.
though, you'll see like little pockets, for instance, where sometimes some of the stuff gets driven by motivation around revenue. So like parking,
Hmm.
like how do I automate the parking process? I'm seeing it here. I was at the airport last night, went through, they use license plate recognition technology to let me out.
Hmm.
And it's where before there used to be a free lot. So now that people are applying technology, not just for the
Right.
building itself, but then also around it, which then as you start to interact that way, the expectation of the user, though, also is like, why would this thing be automated, but that's not? Like, people will start to
Yes.
expect it to be, if I can use my phone to get in my house, why can't I use it to get into my building?
Exactly, right. Eventually it gets there. And then there's frustration that it's not seamless everywhere, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel
Somebody
you.
in our industry, Alan Chester from Any to Any, talks about the fact that access control is like one of the only things where it's like the opposite Superman, where Superman goes into a building and takes off his cape because of our technology. Whereas like everything else that's going on in those buildings, like they're there to try to make you more productive and better and this and that. Our stuff was like, if you interact with our industry, we make you less of Superman, which is now, though, it's changing to where our
Right.
stuff is intended to help with enablement versus, and that's where I
Mhm.
even just think the name access control, like it's about
Yeah.
control, where
Mhm.
a lot of us are starting to talk about access enablement and the story around the expectations of that.
Yeah, true. Like, we were gonna wordsmith it. I mean, but it is true, right? I mean, you want to enable certain access to certain things,
I
right?
hope so, because it's all
Yeah.
my whole business is built around that. So it's not,
That is
then I
too
got to find
funny.
something else to do. But yeah,
Exactly. It's like, I hope it works.
yeah, I sure
Our
hope so.
marketing team worked really hard for that, you
Yeah.
know.
At least that's what I'm going to continue. I'm going to convince a team of one that this is the that it exists.
No, I'm with you. No, that's very, very cool. All right, well, look at that. We're almost at
Uh,
the end of our hour. Look at it. See, went
Perfect.
fast.
See,
This is
thank
how
you.
this goes, man. All
Yeah.
right, well, cool. Well, tell people how they can want to get a hold of you, how they can do that.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. So yeah, if you go to leeodess.com, so my first and last name, just .com, that's our website. I'm all over LinkedIn as well. If you go to Lee Odess at LinkedIn. And if you're interested in the access control industry, non-specific to any company or any product, I like to say I speak for the industry on that end. Happy to help point you in the right direction of companies that and solution providers that can help you with all the things that we just talked about. So please, yeah, reach out.
That's awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Are you going to be at CRETEC this week? Are you going to be in New York City?
I will not be at Cretech this week. There's a show next week called ISC East, which so I'll be in New York the week after
Oh, okay.
for
Yeah.
that. But I've been a big fan of Michael Beckerman, and we used to do a bunch of engagements with him. So it's a great show, and highly recommend people going.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll be there too. All right, well,
Alrighty.
great. Well,
Thank you.
thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. All
Okay.
right.